Welcome to Engage on the Go. I'm Judy Maggio. A priority for Leadership Austin is to increase civic engagement by convening even more people in critical community conversations. We know not everyone's available for our monthly Engage Breakfast, so we're bringing these panel discussions to you through this Engage on the Go series. Our hope is to encourage a thoughtful dialogue about a community issue at a time and place that works for you. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, University Federal Credit Union, who's helping us bring these series of discussions to where we live, work, and play.
Hello, my name is Tony Boudet. I'm CEO of University Federal Credit Union. We're proud to partner with Leadership Austin as presenting sponsor of Engage on the Go. We hope this series sparks thoughtful, respectful dialogues at a time and place that work best for you.
With the 2016 election complete, Texas has kicked off the 85th legislative session. A key area discussed throughout the election cycle was where should decisions be made? What's the role of government from the federal, state, and local level? The Texas Tribune recently reported the state of Texas sued the federal government 48 times since 2009. These were all decisions that the state officials felt should have been made at a state level. Leadership Austin brought together 3 panelists involved in public policy that shared varying perspectives and the challenges finding the balance between all levels of government. What criteria should be used when different levels of government decide what governing body owns decision-making on a certain issue?
What I would say instead is that here in America, here in Texas, the role of government is to preserve, defend, and to protect liberty. And when we're looking at, is that a proper role for government, we should be looking at, does that protect liberty? And if it doesn't, if it's a question mark, then it certainly should be a concern whether that action by the government that imposes itself on us is really in the interest of liberty and is proper for the society that we live in here.
First, as to the role of government, I think there's no doubt that there are certain functions that can only be provided by government, by people acting together collectively. For instance, in the city of Austin, 70% of the city's budget goes to public safety, goes to fire and police and EMS. These are things you don't purchase individually. These are things that we set up together and then are available as we need them. And for the Travis County, it's 50% goes to public safety, which is the courts and the jails and the constables and all. So these are good examples of things that have to be done by government if they're going to be done, and I think we all agree they do need to be done. So the real question is who decides? And I think that actually it's a conservative principle, that the best government is the government closest to the people.
Liberty is a principle for all Americans. But also with that Constitution, to Dick's point, it started with we the people. And so we the people determine what liberty means to us. And we have different definitions of what that is. And Texas is a big enough state. We're our own country. We love to be proud of saying, I'm a Texan. And then after that, well, which city are you from? Because Amarillo is not the same as Dallas or Houston or San Antonio. Austin's always better than San Antonio. We know that, right? So, I mean, and what that looks like in each city means different things to different people.
When is the state interceding on local issues and overreach?
It is proper for the role of the state to challenge federal overreach that exceeds the grant of the Constitution and the limits the federal government has. But in my opinion, since it's the state that did create and give certain powers to the local government entities, it fits within that role for the state to check on those powers and to make sure that the core functions and limited roles for which school districts, counties, and cities were created are actually what's being done. And if it's not, then it is the right purpose for the state to step in and say, let's get back to the role and function of a city or a county.
There are certain overarching rights that individuals have that have to be protected. like the First Amendment right, freedom of religion and freedom of speech. And apparently there's a Second Amendment right involving your right to carry guns. And the federal government and the Supreme Court can uphold those rights and keep the federal government, for that matter, or the state or local governments from violating those rights. But these are bedrock constitutional rights. There's not a right to have the ride-sharing provider that you want, or right to have loud parties in your short-term rental next door because it's South By and you can make a lot of money renting out your house. We have to keep these things clear. There are important constitutional rights, and then there's just preferences, and preferences can be decided by the local community that's most affected by them, and not by people down the end of the street that have come from all over the state with different opinions about how people should live.
What Central Texas initiatives could be affected by the 85th legislative session?
Well, I'm sure everybody in this room knows about the most popular ones, which of course is the TNCs, or as well colloquially referred to as Uber and Lyft issues. Short-term rentals, as has already been mentioned up here. I'd be happy to provide further details on what that means and what that looks like. Plastic bag ban's been brought up already. Fair chance hiring ordinance that the city passed is another one. And then there are issues also related to what Dick can help me speak to, related to revenue caps, how the city is allowed to tax, and also how a city is allowed to annex property. And those two issues actually are very large, and it's going to be an issue for all cities in Texas. So it's really the state government, there's bills that want to curtail our current ability on how we raise revenue and how we manage growth in cities.
Senate Bill 2, and I heard Lieutenant Governor Patrick explain this himself a week before last at the Foundation's annual conference. So I'll get some of the specifics wrong, and I know that Dick and Bree can help me out with that. But essentially right now there's an 8% rollback rate where I guess the appraisal growth or the tax rate can't exceed that 8%. What Governor Patrick has proposed is reduce that to 4%. And if a city wants to exceed 4%, then the city would have to have an election and have the citizenry approve for the tax revenue to be greater than 4%. So it doesn't stop the city from exceeding 4%. It stops the city from exceeding 4% without the citizens' agreement, without the citizens' affirmative consent through an election. So in my mind, it doesn't limit anything other than it limits municipal government, local government to the will of the people, and it ensures that the people have an active voice in addressing this issue when property tax burden is such a high issue for us.
This is just a basic issue. When we say home rule city, what is the most important thing that cities do is they raise money to provide the services that their voters and their constituents want. Either it's home rule or it's not. And if it's home rule, it's up to the people to elect city councils and county commissioners that reflect their desires. If they're happy with the level of service and they don't feel there needs to be any money, that should be reflected in the elections. If they want to improve their community and they think that it's worth it to put extra money into, say, roads, parks, libraries, and, as I mentioned, mainly public safety, they should be free to do that without the state telling them, no, that's too much money.
When we took Senate Bill 2 and applied it to last year's budget, the city of Austin would lose $15 million, and the average homeowner in Austin, about $250,000 home, that has a homestead exemption, would get would pay $30 less in taxes for the year. So that's your tax relief right there, $30.
We know every year you're going to get your tax bill. If you have a home here in Austin, it's going to be maxed out at the cap. Right now, we've seen that the government is unable to police itself. There's tons of ways the city of Austin could cut spending. I think we could all come up with a list right now that would come up with $15 million in change. But without these type of policies in place that protect the citizens, you're just going to see more and more people placed outside of Austin. And, having these caps in place don't limit Austin, don't prevent Austin from collecting more revenue. It just means that before Austin is going to go more than 4% more than what they collect this year, they have to come to you and ask your permission to do so. And I think that's completely reasonable.
What can we do as citizens to make sure decisions are being made on our behalf?
And the call to action, in coming to summarize on this, Judy, what I would challenge everyone is go to the source document. I think there's way too much chatter that happens at social media and the media that paraphrase, that takes things out of context. But with everything that Dick and Bree and myself have been talking about, there is a source document that you can read, and you can make up your own mind as to whether you think it's a good idea. If you go to capital.state.tx.us, you can look up the bill number of every single legislative proposal that's been filed and read it and say, is this a good idea or not? And the city does a great job, I think, of transparency, of putting its ordinances online. And so in order to be informed, before we get involved, I think we should get educated. And the best way to do that is to go to the source, understand what the issues are, and to take a position from there. Thank you, Judy.
Getting engaged. Again, absolutely, I believe that you have to, going very simply, this is a participatory sport. I think I've said that. Calling, visiting, you've got to do something. It's more than just following these issues. And there are plenty of you that do show up at City Hall. And I think that's often missed by our state legislature, that we are responding to people that come to the city and tell us what the problem is. And if those of you believe that the city shouldn't do that, you need to express that as well too. But until they hear from you, they are going to go down their merry way and think that everything's fine. But I do think that at this point, there's something to be said about the community determining, expressing how they want these decisions made. Do you, as a community, want to maintain the self-determination to make these decisions here? Or do you want an elected official from outside your community to make these decisions for you? So, and I think that's where the choice is coming down to.
If everybody knows that Austin is known for civic participation such that it's become a problem because city council meetings go past midnight. But, you know, so obviously you should get in contact with your elected representatives, both in the legislature, your representatives, and your senators, and Congress, obviously, congressmen and senators. And for better or for worse, in Travis County, because of gerrymandering, we actually have access to an unusually large number of state senators and congressmen. You know, my congressman, I live a half a mile from here. My congressman is Lamar Smith from San Antonio. So don't think that just because you live in Austin that everybody who represents Austin is going to agree with you. You need to write to all of them, and to say nothing, of course, of the lieutenant governor and the governor.
We hope you found this edition of Engage on the Go helpful. Greater Austin is a diverse, rapidly growing region, facing issues that will certainly shape this place we call home. Please enjoy your conversation, and thank you for caring enough to share your perspectives with each other.